This is the letter spacing lecture. Space is a place. This is a record by Sun Ra, and I like this as a parallel to what we're looking at today. We're looking at letter spacing. We're looking at both interletter spacing, interline spacing, and how compressed letters can be perceived in comparison to letters that are spaced out. First, we're going to look at the word, line, and spatial measurement. The space between typographic elements is called interletter spacing, or letter spacing. The space between lines of type is called interline spacing, or letting. Adding or subtracting units to expand or contract the space between letters is called tracking. An adjustment in interletter spacing to make an interval more consistent with other letter combinations is called kerning. It's to adjust the awkward spacing between individual letter forms, so it's between two letters. When we look at the letter war at the top, we can see that it is mechanically spaced. On the bottom, it is optically spaced. Mechanical spacing is how we type it out on the computer, how Illustrator or InDesign automatically spaces the letter forms. Optical spacing is adjusting the spacing so that it looks more balanced. The space between the W and the A at the top is wider. The interletter spacing at the bottom is closer together. I used kerning to get these letters to be closer. When we look at the words on the bottom left corner, we can see that as they are closer together, they create more texture. As they are further apart, they create less texture. The further the letters are apart, the lighter the letters are. The closer they are together, the darker they appear. When we look at a serif and a sans serif, we can see that the serif font tends to blend together. That's why serif fonts are typically used in books, in paragraph type. We see sans serif typefaces mostly as headers. That's because they're bolder and they don't blend together. Line placement, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Lines of type can be arranged symmetrically or asymmetrically. As we can see here, when type is centered, it creates a ragged edge on each side that is symmetrical. At the top here, we're looking at justified type. Justified type evenly spaces text within a column. If we look at a flush right text, we can see that the text aligns to the right side of the text box. On a flush left side, we can see that it aligns fully to the left side. And if we look at centered text, we can see that it aligns to the center. Line placement and line alignment. Typographic form becomes lively and harmonious through these alignments, which enhance individual line of type and activate the surrounding space. If we look at the bottom here, we can see complex and subtle relationships in interline spacing are achieved by varying type size, weight, spatial interval, which separate the statements for the reader. The overall effect is a rhythmic and expressive look. Today we're going to be looking at expressive word. These are logo and book titles made by Herb Luebelin. Herb Luebelin also designed typefaces including Avant-Garde typeface and also ITC Luebelin Graph, which is a slab serif. If we look at these logos starting at the right side, we can see that these words are very expressive amongst themselves. They become identities. For example, in families, the I's are duplicated to create this look of a family, some sort of nuclear family, a mother, father, and a child. And this was done for Reader's Digest in the 70s. If we look at mother and child, we can see that Luebelin has put the ampersand inside of the O to give the illusion that this is a child inside of a mother's womb. On the bottom right corner, we're seeing the marriage logo. And if we look at these R's up close, we can see that they're stand-in for figures, that these R's become looking like a human. Posts are like a human body, and that these strokes coming downward, the tails of the R, they're like arms coming down to reach to meet at two hands. Also on the left side, we look at a book cover or a book jacket design for a book titled Beards. We can see that he used the stroke of the letter form and added these curly serifs and curly edges to make it very expressive to look like a beard form. On the left, we're looking at Wolfgang Weingart. He was part of the New Wave design movement with April Grieman and Dan Friedman. On the left, we see a poster of word experiments, and if we examine these, we can see that he is deconstructing type in words to make words have expression of content. Let's look at flying first. We can see him dismantling the Y, disrupting the Y and turning it into an airplane-like shape, and adding a mark to the I to make it look like a command tower. In Athens, he's using alternate characters like V and W, and turning them around like upside down to make an A form, or on its side to make an E form that looks like Greek print. On the word point, we can see that Weingart is disrupting the I, making a little white space there to make it look like a point on top of the letter form. Or we could say that it looks like a finger pointing. On Italy, we can see him adding these block-like shapes to the top of the letter forms to create these figurative-like forms. On the bottom, on stop, we can see him disrupting the P to make it look like a question mark. On the right, we're looking at Martin Vineschi. This is a catalog for the Appetite of Engineers. It was a promotion for his design firm. We can see that he is deconstructing words into parts to have a playful and experimental interaction. In this particular page in the catalog, we can see he spells out ambition is no sin. And we can see this reoccurring throughout the book if we look at the bottom here. When looking at this particular page, we see a lot of repetition. We see the repetition of the M and the B. We see the repetition of these line forms. We also see the repetition of O and N turning into no here. You can see this kind of symmetrical like shape it's creating. We also see the replication of the I's kind of coming down right here. It is sin. Ambition is no sin. Very experimental in his approach. On the left here, we're looking at Saul Bass's design for Alfred Hitchcock's movie, Psycho. And if we look at the design of the letter forms of the word psycho on the left here, we can see that it looks like ripped paper, that it looks broken, almost like appearing psychopathic in its structure. We also see this in the title scene of the movie Psycho. Saul Bass designed this intro to Psycho and the movie credits. We can see that he disrupts the letter forms to make them look very psychotic. And with the music done by Bernard Herrmann, it has a very expressive feel to it. Let's watch the video for a second here. We're looking at a couple more of Saul Bass's poster designs. On the left, we're looking at the poster for Vertigo, another Alfred Hitchcock movie. In the typography on the left here, we can look and see how the typography almost has a vertigo-like effect, that it's very distorted, the angles aren't rigid, that they're off kilter, giving this kind of illusion that it's off balance, much like somebody who has vertigo. We can see he uses the centrifugal imagery that we see in the movie of Jimmy Stewart watching Kim Novak fall. On the right side, we're looking at another poster by Saul Bass for West Side Story. And we can see that letter forms become like geometric slabs, that he put this texture on the type to make it appear as a building, that West Side Story becomes this architectural structure, and we can see the dancers are on the fire escape, much like the play. We're looking at Ben Shaw's type for Ben's Folk Condensed. Ben Shaw designed this typeface for The Shape of Content, a book that he wrote on the aesthetics of art. This book analyzes what art is and how art can be perceived by others. It's interesting because he actually designed a typeface that is very expressive and unusual and very artistic for a book about art. On the right, we're looking at the cherry tree legend, and we can see that he's taking these letter forms and changing them into these organic, tree-like and plant-like structures. These are two book designs done by Edward Gorey. If we look at the left, we're looking at the Iron Tonic. And if we know anything about Edward Gorey, he often makes these dark stories or dark fairy tales. He also did several book jackets during the 40s, 50s, and 60s that were very expressive and illustrative. If we look at the left side at Iron Tonic, we can see that it's very Gothic oriented, that has a very expressive form, very much looking like roots from a plant, almost like veins reaching out. So we can tell that this story is going to be a dark story. On the right, we can see that Dracula has this very flowing type, which almost looks like it's flying in the sky, much like the bats that are flying in the sky. If we look at the type in the middle here that's centered, it almost appears like a tombstone with this very angular type, which kind of mimics a lot of the things that we see in Dracula, the pointed collar, the pointed bat wings, the pointy teeth. So very much mimicking or expressing aspects of the story. This is the expressive word homework exercise. And what I'd like for our students to do is to choose 2 words from the list below, and in 2 different compositions, arrange each word to express its meaning, 1 word per composition. The student will explore the way to visually find a method of conveying the expressive content of the word. Each student will make 2 documents, a 6 by 6 inch square document in Illustrator. The student may experiment with size, spacing, placement, orientation of the letters. Use the typeface Futura Heavy. You may repeat, omit, slice, or overlap words. Use tracking, kerning, and leading as methods of spacing. Do not use drop shadows or horizontal/vertical scaling. That means distortion. What I'd like for students to do is always hold the Shift key when scaling. Consider the entire space of the square. These are some student examples from Ellen Lupton's class at Maryland Institute College of Art. On the left, we can see that the R is poked out to create a disruption in this word. And on compression on the right, we can see that the letter forms get compressed as they move further and further to the right side. On the left, we're looking at transition, and we can see how the student made the word transition from one side of the composition to the left side of the composition. If we look at these other 2 student examples, we can see that the student simply typed out the word repetition, and they took the O formats and made or repeated different versions of the letter O. Likewise, on the right here, we see that the student took the word elimination, took out the T, and scattered the T's among the composition. These are some student examples from PVCC. On the left, we have repetition, and we can see that this student created this diagonal form and created R's, or replicated R's over and over and over in repetition. This student took apart the word disruption and put another word disruption to disrupt the word. On the left side, we have the student starting with add and adding a letter to each iteration of the word until we end up with addition. On the right side, we see compression. We see that the student took the word and compressed the word until it becomes almost illegible. And these are 2 more student examples. These are older. where confused is mixed up, but you can still read it. And displaced is physically displaced or disrupted in the middle. So I look forward to seeing your expressive words, and good luck.